Welcome to the Worthy of Greatness podcast. I'm your host, Angie Gensler, former corporate marketer turned seven-figure online business owner. Inside each episode of the podcast, you'll discover actionable tips and inspiring advice to help you master your mindset, manifest your goals, and live a truly fulfilled, healthy, and prosperous life. Your path to greatness starts right here. Hey guys, welcome to Worthy of Greatness. I am so excited to bring this incredible guest to you today. Her name is Nikki Langman, and she is an international speaker, #1 best-selling author, thought leader on emotional intelligence and self-mastery, and an ultra-endurance runner. She is passionate about personal transformation and self-leadership. Nikki teaches how to get the results you want consistently, increase your courage and confidence, deepen your authenticity, take more purposeful action, lead more effectively, and manifest love and respect for yourself at all times. I mean, how incredible is that? Who wouldn't want that? So, Nikki, welcome to Worthy of Greatness. I am so excited to have you on the show today.
Hello, Angie. Wonderful to be here.
Yeah. Okay. So, Nikki, I want to get started by hearing a little bit about the work that you do. If you can tell us about who you serve and how you help them achieve greatness.
Yeah. Okay. The work that I do. So I specialize in emotional intelligence, and that is something that has kind of come from, let's say, kind of, rooted in my psychology days back in university, where I took a real interest in human behavior and how people work. So what makes people do the things that they do? And I think in all that, in hindsight, I was probably more trying to understand myself than anyone else. But nonetheless, I was able to, really start to build a career out of that. And I zoned in on emotional intelligence because it was like that, the one thing that no other aspect of psychology or human behavior offered. And that was the introspection to be aware of ourselves and the impact we have on the world. And so that was really exciting for me. And over the course of my career, I've expanded on that. I've come to specialize in it. And now I'm a master trainer in those areas. So my whole purpose in business and in life is about self-leadership. That everything that we do and do well and all of our success comes from the way we lead and manage ourselves first. So kind of the second part of your question there, who do I serve? Well, there's the politically correct answer to that, and there's the truth. So let's go with the truth. I serve myself. And that needs explaining. So when people hear that, the immediate reaction that I would anticipate is, wow, that's pretty self-centered. Ooh, I don't know if I'd be admitting that. But the truth is that going back to what I was saying about emotional intelligence, if we don't understand ourselves, we have no chance of understanding anybody else. If we can't serve ourselves first, then we don't have enough to give to other people. And so people will hear me, go on and on and on and on about that you must put yourself first if you have any chance of being great for other people. And so that's, I use an analogy of, let's say you live near a lake and you can't swim, but you see people out in the lake and when they start to drown and get in trouble, you jump in because you just want to save them. And you do this over and over and over. You jump in, you want to save people, but you can't swim. So what ends up happening is that 4 more people have to jump in to rescue you and the person you're trying to rescue, right? At some point, I might take you aside and go, Angie, you know what? Stop jumping in the lake until you learn how to swim. As soon as you know how to swim, by all means, go rescue other people. And, when you use that analogy in our work lives or the way we parent or the way that we show up as a friend or, any other aspect of our lives, if we're not showing up with ourselves fully intact, then we're doing other people a disservice.
Wow. I love that analogy. I've never heard that before of the, being able to swim before you jump in and save someone else. That's a great analogy.
Thank you.
So Nikki, you sent me a copy of your book before the interview, and I'm so excited. I skimmed it a little bit, and I cannot wait to dig in because it's really incredible. And you have some amazing concepts in here about how to be a badass. But before we jump into your framework, I want to talk a little bit about the start of your journey, because as I was reading through your bio, I was so amazed with where you started and where you are now at today. So, can we go way back to the beginning of your journey and talk about some of the struggles that you had to overcome to now become this badass that you are today?
Sure. All right, listeners, strap in. Yes. So my backstory is about addiction. And I have, in the last few years, and especially since the release of my book, I've really started to come forward with a very powerful message about addiction. But let me tell you, it was shrouded in 35 years of shame and silence. So it's funny. It's really new for me to even be able to talk with full disclosure about the things that I have been through. And that's 100% because of stigma and shame. And sometimes, it's funny, I did an interview very recently. I'll go back to the beginning in a second, but I did an interview very recently where I was pumped, I was confident, I was ready. I knew I was going to smash any questions those interviewers asked. And instead, I fell completely apart. And I joked later, I said, you know what? I opened the door for vulnerability and confidence walked out.
Oh.
And sometimes that happens, but this is anyone who's listening to this, I think, when you have felt in your own way stigmatized or shamed in anything, it's a really, really powerful motivator for silence. And I hope that slowly I can become stronger in my conviction and that I can help other people become stronger in their conviction to talk about the way that they have been stigmatized or shamed. So as a preface there, I'll drop that one. So my relationship with addiction started at about 7 years old. And that was my first memory of having a problem and turning to alcohol for the solution, because that's what I saw the adults in my life do. When adults were upset, they had a drink and then they seemed better. So, to a young child, it was like, oh, okay, well, there's something magic in that water and it must be good for me.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. Huh? I know. And I'm 100% certain that those adults never intended it to look like that. But, in my childlike mind, that was just, okay, that's how you solve problems. And I think that there's a lot of science and a lot of research about, alcoholism being genetic or, predisposed to factors like trauma and whatnot. I didn't really have any trauma in my life, but I do believe that I probably carry some sort of gene from, my predecessors that predisposed me to addiction. Because without even being consciously aware of what I was doing as I was growing up, moving into my early teenage years, getting into high school, I had a raging addiction happening where at the first part of my book, I lay it bare and I talk about lies and secrecy and manipulation and deception and not, I had a good Christian upbringing. There was nothing in my environment that would have suggested that I was a horrible person or that I deserved to be punished. I was a sick little girl surrounded by people who loved and cared for me. And that's how powerful the disease can be.
Man.
Anyway, so went into my first treatment center in my teenage years, around 15, was introduced to AA at that point and had a really, really, really good first few years of sobriety. But, then I think if you're in recovery, you really have to be in recovery and you have to be practicing it, because once you start to put recovery to the side and think that you're okay and it was just a phase and whatnot, all those little things that we like to tell ourselves, then I started to get in trouble again. And it was the next 20 years till my mid-30s that was just in and out of treatment and recovery and getting time built up of sobriety only to then relapse again. And each relapse was harder and faster and stronger. And finally, I was able to break free from it completely and get to a point of full acceptance. And now I'm very pleased that I have several years several years behind me of complete and total sobriety and acceptance. But I work with the awareness every single day that I have to manage it, that I can never let it just be on the side.
Yeah. Wow. Nikki, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I know that's not easy to share that. And congratulations too to you for overcoming that. It's such an incredible thing that you have accomplished. I also saw that you overcame the drug and alcohol addiction and then you got into endurance running. Is that correct?
Yes.
Or is that what helped you?
Yeah, actually, well, I say more than anything, emotional intelligence has helped me stay sober. And it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of you have to be able to swim before you can jump in and try to save anyone else. And so emotional intelligence helps me to regulate my own behavior by being able to look in the mirror and be honest with myself. And notice when those yellow lights or those yellow flags are coming, because I know my triggers better than anybody else does. But am I going to be honest with myself about those triggers is the question, right? So more than anything else, EI, emotional intelligence, has been my saving grace and continues to be. And, even as I know we'll jump ahead to current time eventually, but, in the middle of a pandemic too, I'm relying on that as my sanity piece of being able to be honest with myself as my sanity piece. Where running comes in is because I found when I say I got sober, I stayed sober, and I was able to fully accept it, and that was the changing point for me. It's kind of that was part two. Part one is now closed. Part two is I fully accept it and I live free of addiction. But what I don't live free of is the emotion that was behind the drink, that was behind the pills. And so, I talk about in my book, I say, I'm angry. I'm a really angry person. Just because I wear my emotions so much on the surface, and I feel love deeply. I feel anger deeply. And I struggle to regulate that. And as somebody who likes being on the edge, so, I'm drawn to extreme behaviors. So I love roller coasters. I love skydiving, bungee jumping, and definitely, filling my body with substances that make me feel superhuman. And so you think that if somebody is so comfortable living on the edge, that they would be equally drawn to the other edge of doing extremely positive things. And so I started running as a way of just kind of expelling the energy out of me to tone down the anger so that I would just feel more calm and even keeled, because I didn't have a drink anymore or a handful of pills to swallow. So I had to do something with all the energy. And the more I started running, the more I started being drawn to the longer distances and, pushing my limits, because that's just where I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable pushing limits. And whether that's in a bad way or a good way. And anyway, eventually, after a couple of years of running, I was pushing myself to compete in ultra marathons. So an ultra is anything that is longer than a marathon length. So,
oh, wow.
26 miles. So anything beyond that. And the level that I'm currently, that I've competed at this year a couple of times is around like that 37-mile mark.
Holy cow.
Yeah. But it's kind of, for me, that's just normal because I'm comfortable being an outlier. Does it work for emotional management? Yes, it does. I can certainly say that, after a good long run, I have no more anger left in me. So
nice.
I'll leave it all out on the road.
That's fantastic that you found, your thing, what works for you. Okay. So for everyone listening who wants to learn how to, navigate their own road to self-mastery, which is what you talk about specifically in your book, How to Be a Badass. Can you just briefly walk listeners through your badass framework so they can get a feel for what it looks like?
Yeah, of course. So going back a few minutes ago where I said that it's only been in the last few years that I've really come forward and been very open and honest about my whole story. And that's still, still very green, that ground of my comfort in doing that. I'm not a seasoned pro ready to go on Oprah and start talking about, the things that happened when I was a child. I'm still very raw about it. But in the process, so even before I wrote my book, I started speaking. And this was, I'm an emotional intelligence specialist. I'm used to being in front of people. I'm used to running and facilitating training groups. I speak at conferences, I speak at events, all on the topic of emotional intelligence. So I had a seasoned resume as an EI practitioner and a speaker. But then I wanted to start inspiring people more. I wanted to be that message of hope and inspiration. But I was really scared about getting personal. So Angie, it's like, how do you inspire someone without telling them who you are? We just can't be inspired by someone because they say, hey, listen to me, I know what I'm talking about. You have to see it. You have to see that realness, that rawness that person carries to be inspired by them. And then when you're inspired by them, then you'll listen to the words they have to say. So I was trying to shortcut that process, right? I can talk about neuroscience. I can talk about emotions. I can talk about you and why you should listen to me. But let's just short circuit the part where I tell you about me. And I know some of your listeners have nodded their head up and down right now. And so that was the part that I really had to cultivate, was in being a speaker and really becoming a motivational speaker or an inspirational speaker. I had to start, pulling together some of my own stories and my own vulnerability. And around that same time, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to start, I've always wanted to write a book. So let's just start gathering some material. And so I was getting opportunities. I was going out on stages and I was talking about being a badass, right? And the way I meant that was as like a noun, like I am a badass. I'm somebody who's got this. I want to go out there on stage and I want to pump you up by saying, yeah, we got this. We're badasses. Wow. And create all this kind of energy, which now even in saying that sounds very masculine. Like I was, trying to, rouse the beasts or something. But it wasn't landing well. I'd say maybe 20% of my audience was with me. They were cheering and rawing. Oh yeah, we got this. We're badasses. We're the best of the best. And the other, majority of people weren't really caring or listening or following up. And so I started to think, okay, I'm doing something wrong here because I'm not getting the response that I think I should be getting. And so through some exceptional feedback, I realized that I was using a wonderful word, but it wasn't coming across the way I wanted it to, because a lot of people take offense to that word. Okay. So then I thought, well, all right, I need to break this down. What do I look like when I'm a badass? How am I, when I feel like I'm my most powerful self? What do I look like? What am I doing? What impression am I giving people? What are they seeing? And so I really had to have those really emotionally intelligent, honest talks with myself about what a badass was. And it just, Angie, over the next few months, it was like all the letters just fell into place. And I did a lot of my thinking when I was out on the road, when I was running, as often I would have hours of time in my head without any interruption, just, that rhythmic pounding the pavement and thinking and going deep with myself about what is it that I want people to catch. And then it kind of fell into place. B is brave, A, authentic, D, direction, A, action, and S, self-love, and S, self-talk. And when I am all of those things, I am a badass.
I love it. And I mean, you guys, you've got to get a copy of Nikki's book because she walks you through each of those letters in detail. So, what does it look like when you're being brave? What does that mean? And, each of those letters. So you'll get the full details around them. So we won't go into them in this podcast, so you guys can get a copy of her book. But Nikki, I do want to talk a little bit about the final S, the self-talk, because this one has been really monumental for me. And I feel like the self-talk I feel like it's been one of my main keys to success with my own business, because there are so many negative messages. And I think every entrepreneur faces them, right? There's so much fear and doubt and negative self-talk. And I think being able to overcome that is so key to achieving greatness in your life, to becoming a badass. So I'd love to hear, your thoughts around self-talk and what that looks like for people.
Yeah, you're not wrong at all. There is so much power in our self-talk. And I think a lot more than we realize or give our brains credit for, because it is very, very powerful. I love that the quote that's attributed to Buddha, saying that, what we think we will become. I'm not saying the quote in its entirety, but there's a quote like that says, what we think we will become. So what we attract into our lives is what we will become. And ultimately the way that we think about ourselves. I think that we become self-defeating out of protection for ourselves. So, I think there's comfort in numbers, and there's comfort in being a part of a group. And to be great, to be extraordinary, to be worthy of greatness requires you to leave the safety of the group and stand out. I love the thought that you cannot be outstanding unless you stand out. And that can be a very vulnerable place. So, I love the title of your podcast, Worthy of Greatness, because that requires that you and everyone that you interview have, at some point reckoned with themselves about, do I want to be part of the flock, or do I want to lead the charge? And if I want to lead the charge, I have to stick my neck out, and I have to be out there, and I have to let people see me. And that is vulnerable. But that is the only way to really be great, is to allow yourself to be vulnerable. And, it's kind of like what I was saying a few minutes ago about, I want to inspire people, I want to empower people, but I don't want to share my story. Yeah, that's not trustworthy. Mm-hmm. What is trustworthy is that vulnerability. And in order to be okay with sticking your neck out, being vulnerable and standing out, is that your self-talk has to support those actions. And it might be really hard, and it might hurt, and you might get rejected, and you might fall down, and you might get bad publicity. And that's just all part of, the overall risk of being great. So, when I think of people who inspire me with their self-talk, I think of I know in my book, I talk about Muhammad Ali. I say, okay, he was arguably one of the best boxers of all time. I think we all can nod our heads, and yet he definitely is up there, maybe in the top three, maybe maybe number one, depends on who you ask. But what did he do? He said, I am the greatest. He said that long before he was actually being reckoned as one of the greats. He said, I am the greatest. He said, he whispered it to himself. He screamed it from mountaintops. He roared his chest. He said, I am the greatest, long before anyone else believed him. But he said it. He talked to himself. He told himself, I am the greatest. And then, you know what? He became, the greatest. You look at other people like, Will Smith. Yeah, I love the guy. I absolutely think he's brilliant in 100 different ways. And when he talks about his early days coming out as, he was the Fresh Prince, and he came out and he was like, I knew I was going to be a Hollywood A-lister. Y'all just didn't know it yet, but he believed it. And there's so many other people, Oprah Winfrey, people who I admire so much, who have mastered the art of self-talk. But what most of us do, 99.9% of the population, we will stop ourselves before we will ever become an A-lister or the greatest, or somebody who's reckoned as being successful. And I don't know if that's just instinct or maybe the way that we have been raised. Maybe we were raised in an era of, it's not, you don't want to call attention to yourself because that, is, I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Yeah, I think we're all taught to be, you got to be humble. Don't be boastful.
Yeah. And like, that's virtuous. But, when I started, when I started my speaking career, and I was getting out on stages and I was getting in front of people and I was talking about being a badass. And before I, actually could break it down for them, when I was still, when only about 20% of the audience were actually latching onto the idea, but I was believing it. I was full of conviction going, I am a badass, because the way I am interpreting this is I am somebody who is the best of the best at what I do. And I know that I'm successful in my recovery. I'm parenting well. I'm a good wife. I know what I'm talking about when I talk about emotional intelligence. And I really care for other people. And so when I was saying it, I am a badass, even if they weren't catching on, I felt it. I felt it and I knew it, and I was able to live it because I believed in myself. I believed in what I was saying. Where we get really caught with self-talk, though, is in, we reinforce negative messages. So, I talk about like an example of, confirmation bias, how, we have centers in our brain, and the book will go into this. I won't talk about it, but there are parts of our brains that will look for confirmation of our beliefs about things. So, let's take, most women are not happy with what they see when they look in the mirror, right? I think we can all agree on that. Now, let's just say that you think that you have a double chin. And every time you look at a photo of yourself, you see, yep, that's it. God, look at that double chin. Oh my God, I got a triple chin there. No way. But if you believe that you have a double chin, you're going to start looking for that and start looking for that confirmation that you are overweight, or, you have saggy boobs or something. There's something wrong with you. And you're just reconfirming it and reconfirming it and reconfirming it. But we do that emotionally too. I always say the stupidest things in meetings. I should just keep my mouth shut. Right. And then, and you can feel where this can go. It can really, really, everything that we strive to achieve and build in our lives, every shred of intelligence and credibility that we try to gain, we can take it down in 1 minute, just with the way that we talk to ourselves.
I always say that kind of your greatest enemy is often yourself. I mean, you are the one person holding you back more than anyone or anything else in this world, is that negative self-talk.
100%. And, go back to the beginning of the podcast where you said, who do you serve? And I said, well, okay, there's two ways of answering that. 100%. You have to serve yourself first. You have to be on your side. The wisest thing you can ever do is be on your own side. Maya Angelou said that, not me. But wow, isn't that true? When we feel worthy of greatness, then other people will start to believe us. But if we don't feel we're worthy of greatness, if we don't feel like we deserve to stand out, then you know what? Other people will let us be in the shadows.
Yeah. It's absolutely true, man. Well, Nikki, so when you are serving yourself, do you have some sort of morning routine, evening routine? Is there something that you do daily to make sure that you are serving yourself first so that you can give the world the best version of yourself?
Yeah, I have learned, and I keep learning every day, that if I don't get out and get my run in first thing, it doesn't happen. And I've seen this, so I'm in Australia, and we're currently in our 6th lockdown. And so I think we've just passed like 200 days in isolation, not consecutive, but over the last 18 months, we've spent 200 of those days in isolation. And so one of the only things that we're allowed to do is go outside and exercise. But because now I'm not working from an office, I'm working from home, and my desk, my workspace is literally 5 steps from the fridge. Yes, I've measured that. And sadly, and about 10 steps to the bedroom. So my entire life has become, very, very small. At least my space. I live in an apartment. So, just very small. If I get up in the morning and go turn on the computer to say, oh, I want to respond to this email, or I just had this thought overnight or something, for any reason, if I turn on the computer, I will still be there at dinner time. And I know this, and I tell myself every single day, you have to get on your shoes and get out the door. Do not turn on the computer. Do not do it. Do not pass go. Get out, collect your $200, come back, and then you can start working. And you know what? I still try to trick myself. No. I'm just going to send this one email and then I'll go for a run. So I guess my point in that is I need to be more disciplined about my morning routine, because I think it is that important. It sets the tone for my day. And I know if I've had an hour-long run, or at least I've gotten some fresh air, and my lungs are full of, freshness, even in the winter. Right now it's winter and it's really cold, but you just get that real clean feeling in your body. That will turn my entire day around. But if I give into the temptation of the inbox, then I might have an okay day, but I'm more likely to be stressed at the end of it. And so maybe your listeners can share with me some of their great tips and tricks for disciplining yourself, for getting, sticking to a morning routine. But I have found that I'm not admittedly as good at it during this pandemic as I used to be.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad you said that, because I got to be honest. I mean, the same occurs to me day in and day out. I know, like, when I wake up, don't read the news. Like, it's going to make me feel like crap, and then it's going to lead to a bad day. And so many times I lose that battle. But I think that's just being human. And I think part of, that path to greatness is the self-awareness. So that emotional intelligence piece that you teach about is, just being aware of what works for you, what doesn't work for you, being aware of when maybe you falter and you start the day, you make bad choices, but not totally beating yourself up over it, just being aware and trying again.
Yeah. And, I think there's a lot of merit too in having safe people. So giving people permission to call you out. So I don't know, maybe you have this with Trevor, but with my husband, I do give him permission to stick his neck out and tell me if I'm not in the best mood. You can see where this is leading. But he does occasionally say that I am a nicer person when I get some exercise in.
Yep. Trevor will say the same thing. But so here's what I'm curious about. If he says it in the moment, like where maybe you're not being a nicer person, do you receive it well?
No.
Okay. Yeah. Like I don't either. And so, but I always feel bad because I'm like, if he approaches it, off subject, just some random time, he's like, you're always in a better mood when you work out more. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I am. But if it happens in the moment, I don't receive it well at all.
No. And in fact, even if Paul could hear me now, he'd probably be shaking his head and rolling his eyes like, no, you never receive it well. And not in the moment, not the next day. But there's actually, I'm working on something right now where I am talking about identifying your safe people and creating an environment of safe people. And what this means is whether it's in your workplace or in your family, or, who are the people who you can give permission to call you out on your bad behaviors, and where they will not personalize your response or attack. So, for example, I do have a relationship with my sister, who she's one of my safe people, and she and I have traveled our whole lives. We have taken so many trips together, all over the world. We've gone on, I think, 11 cruises or something. I mean, we have spent our whole life traveling with each other. And oh God, the things she has put up with, God bless her. But one thing that, that has happened is I get very cranky with hypoglycemia if I don't eat often enough. And, this is kind of, part of I run at a faster pace. I'm higher energy just by nature. And so I don't notice when I start to get irritable because I've crossed the line into hypoglycemia. She'll see it, and she knows me well enough. She'll see it. So she'll, hi, Nick, how you going? Yeah, I'm fine. How do you feel about half a protein bar? And and when she says that, it's usually not met with, oh yeah, thanks, that's a great idea. Cool, checking in with you later. It's usually met with a lot of venom coming from me. But then I realize that no, okay, she's seeing something that I'm not. And this is part of my emotional intelligence, part of my self-awareness, is that I have allowed her, I've given her permission to call me out when she sees something that maybe I don't yet. And so, okay, I know this, I've accepted it. I'll go have half a protein bar or, a 7-Up or something. And then I start to notice, yeah, I am feeling better. And that works because she doesn't personalize my response. And I have given her permission. So therefore I respect what she says. And if you can have relationships like that, and especially in a workplace, if you have colleagues or coworkers who you can call each other out when you see something or they see something that you don't, that's really good. Cultivate those relationships.
Yeah, I love that advice. I think the key to that, and it's so smart that you added that piece of someone who will not personalize your attack.
Yeah, I think that's a fundamental piece there. Yeah, they have to agree not to take it personally.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, Nikki, I have enjoyed talking to you so much. I could talk all day, but we need to wrap things up. So I want to give you a chance to let listeners know, how can they connect with you? How can they get a copy of your book? And how can they work with you or maybe hire you for a speaking event?
Yeah, absolutely. So in these wonderful times of everything has gone virtual and online, it has expanded my ability to work across the world, which is really, really exciting. So yes, come to my website, nikkilangman.com. So NIKKILANGMAN.com. And from there, you can drop me a note, type in your email address. I'll get back to you. I love personal connections. So I try to respond to every single person that I meet and get in contact with. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts, love to hear what you think about this session, or what other topics maybe you would love to hear in the future. And you can definitely get a copy of my book there, which I would love to share with you.
That's fantastic, Nikki. And I also heard that you were going to give a special discount to our listeners to get a copy of your book. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So just type in the promo code greatness20 for 20% off the price of the book.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for offering that discount. That is so generous of you. Guys, go get a copy of this book. You are going to love it. And Nikki, I also love to leave listeners with action steps. And I know you are an action-oriented woman because that was one of the letters in your badass framework, which I just loved. So do you have any action steps, some advice that you can leave listeners with that maybe they can go take with them as they go about the rest of their day today to become more of a badass or improve their emotional intelligence and self-mastery?
A couple of things that I think are just really, really, really key points is recognize your yellow lights. Be honest with yourself. And I think you should do this right now. As soon as you click stop or hang up from this episode, go to the mirror and be honest with yourself. You don't have to tell anyone else about what your self check-in results look like, but be honest with yourself. How are you doing? Are you okay? And just have that really deep and honest conversation, because if you're lying to yourself for any reason, you're going to be in a lot more trouble later on. So notice those yellow flags, the yellow lights when they come up, and be honest with yourself. And then the other thing I want to say is fill your tank first. So as much as we want to give to other people around us, and as much as we want to fill up other people's tanks, make sure that yours is full first. Because if you are not full, all you can possibly give are pieces. So be honest with yourself and fill up your tank first. And when you have those two things, go get it. Go get it. You got the day. It's yours.
Nice. I love it. Thank you so much, Nikki. I really appreciate the time that you've taken. I know you are calling from Australia. It's close to 5 a.m., but we just started this call at 4 a.m. So I really appreciate you getting up early and joining me today and sharing your wisdom and your greatness with my listeners.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you so much for listening to the Worthy of Greatness podcast at angiegensler.com. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and make sure that you subscribe to the podcast so that you get access to all future episodes. Now, I always like to leave my listeners with an action step, because your path to greatness is paved with small steps of action. So I want you to take action right now and head over to angiegensler.com/podcast, where you can download your free copy of my 3 Days of Greatness workbook. Now, this workbook is designed to help you supercharge your path to greatness and create a business and life you love. Plus, it's totally free, so head over to angiegensler.com/podcast to download your copy. I hope you'll join me in the next episode, and until then, remember, you are worthy of greatness.